Welcome to SharePoint Patterns and Practices Special Interest Group. So this is the May 31st, 2017 edition. We've been surprisingly busy for the last week for the PnP core team, and right now I'm, for example, calling from Zagreb because the European Collaboration Summit is ongoing. But we still wanted to obviously keep the meeting to make sure that there's some time for Q&A in the end as well, and also do some elements and some demos which we skipped last time. And then obviously the really important thing is that discussion in the end as well. I'm watching on the attendee people list. Paolo should be joining as well. So we're going to talk about today few kind of things, which are the main things on our mind. So PnP provisioning, schema, so updated elements and all of that. And my assumption is that Paolo is actually ready to do a small demo or coverage on that one. And Paolo can actually correct me if that's a mistake. And because Paolo was in the Zagreb with me as well. Yes, Paolo is in the room. Cool. And then the second thing is something which was skipped 2 weeks ago, because even though this is the PnP PowerShell and the PnP site score special interest group, and we do have a special interest group also for SharePoint Framework. Last time we covered some of the announcements from Build, which is related on SharePoint Framework. Because the PnP site core and the PnP PowerShell is quite often used in the context of provisioning sites and configuring functionalities. And obviously, all of the new capabilities within the SharePoint Online, they do, you typically use them within the context of PnP PowerShell and site score. Last time, we were planning to have a quick live demo on Office 365 Dev C&D or Office 365 Content Delivery Network. So I'm going to do a quick demo on that one today because we should have time on that. So two main topics, nothing groundbreaking at this point from our side other than that. And that should give us enough time for the Q&A in the end as well, which is a big part of this special interest groups as well. Now, let's actually move on things. So this slide, or a miscellaneous announcement, was already in the slides 2 weeks ago as well. But we have now finally released the PnP site score API reference documentation in MSDN. And we keep on updating this one in the future as well. As part of this documentation, I don't know how many of you are following up on the social media and what's happening, for example, in the European Collaboration Summit. We did talk about today, for example, with the attendee, the fact that MSDN is actually gradually going to go away. So if right now, if you're looking into, for example, SharePoint adding model guidance, all of that is nowadays already in the SharePoint. And the PnP PowerShell and the PnP documentation will be also transforming later to the docs.microsoft.com/SharePoint. So we're moving gradually our stuff to the new docs.microsoft.com platform. But initial step is to get everything consolidated to dev.office.com/SharePoint. And we do understand that it might be kind of a terrifying that we're shutting down MSDN, but that's mainly because the MSDN platform and the tools for the MSDN are not up to date. So it's a super old CMS content management system. And in general, in Microsoft, everybody is moving away from it. So also the SharePoint documentation, SharePoint development guidance is moving away from MSDN. Now, that was a quick, just the only announcement before we go to the PnP PowerShell and the schema discussion. And I'm hoping that Paolo can do a live demo and discussion on this one. Just before we go there, just kind of a quick, kind of a semi-announcements as well. I didn't do a slide on this one, but this month on May 2017, first time ever, we actually broke more than 5,000 tenants using PnP site score or PnP PowerShell within SharePoint Online. And that's a pretty big achievement. So the community initiative PnP site score and PnP PowerShell is already or has been used more than 5,000 tenants in May 2017. And the engine is used in more than 1,300 tenants. So there's quite a lot of other people using the community tooling as well, which is a great achievement. And obviously on the engine side, we've been trying to get our updated schema to be ready, so we're able to implement some of the needed capabilities from the engine, which are exposed in CSOM. And this is precisely the topic what we're going to go through right now. So Paolo is going to walk through some of the changes and updates which are being introduced in the PnP provisioning schema, and then they will be introduced in the PnP provisioning as well. So we're able to more flexibly configure the sites and configure the tenants and all of that. But Paolo, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Excellent. Excellent.
Okay, so I can take over the stage?
Yeah, please do take over. And let's go. Oh, my title is wrong. Oh, sorry for that. Sorry for that.
Oh, now I will do a SharePoint Framework extension demo, of course.
No, that's fine. So let's coming back on this slide, and we'll skip the demo slide then. But Paolo is going to do some sharing and clarifications on the situation. So.
Okay, so as usual, please let me know when you can see my screen, and then I will start talking about the news that we have at the schema level.
Yeah, loading for me in Croatia, and got it. So you're being cool as well. So you're using black background.
Yes, because I want to look like a young boy. So
exactly. All the cool kids are using black background. Yeah.
I still need to move the Solution Explorer on the left, but maybe I will do pretty soon. Okay. So back on track. From a schema perspective, we tried to get all of the requests that we collected in the issues list in the PnP schema repo. And just to let you know what is the PnP schema repo, let me show you. Oops, let me get rid of this guy. Okay, let me open one browser and I will show you what is the schema repo and where we do collect all of the issues usually. PnP provisioning schema. And here, under the issues section, we collected in the last few months a bunch of requests from the community, as well as new ideas for new improvements of the engine. And what we tried to do was to go through all of them and try to provide a solution at the schema level to satisfy those new requirements, those new ideas. There are still some pending issues, mainly because some of them are just questions, as this one, for example, or because we need much more discussion, internal discussion about some of the topics, because some of them, even if it would be really great to have almost everything at schema and at the engine level, it is always related to the number of efforts that we can provide to improve the engine. So sometimes we have to make some choices and we cannot have everything, 100% of all of the requirements ready to go in the schema and in the engine. Nevertheless, let me try to show you what we did and what we have now in the new schema. And first of all, the new schema will be 2017-05, so will be May 2017. This month, and that's why we are talking about it right now. And in order to make it easy for you to identify what are the changes that we made in the schema, we started from the previous version, which was 2016-05. And whenever we have something new, I simply added an annotation from an XML schema perspective, which states added with schema version 2017-05. And since now on, I think that we should do that for every new schema version so that we can track at the documentation level when we introduced any new capability. Because I will be able, using the engine that generates the MD documentation, automatically generates the MD documentation for the schema, to include this information so that you will be able to see what is new and what is old, let me say, or already there. Maybe it is better. So, first of all, from a provisioning template perspective, we are going to add the capability to define site webhooks. From a SharePoint online perspective, as Vesa can explain you, we still don't have the capability to have site level webhooks. Nevertheless, they are already on the table of someone in Microsoft. So we decided to already introduce this capability at the schema level. And as soon as there will be the capability to define a site level webhook, we will be already ready from a schema perspective. And so we just have the capability to define a list of webhook objects, where every single webhook object has a type webhook, which defines what kind of webhook we wanna intercept, as well as few more information about, for example, the URL that's to be called to create the webhook, so that we can help you define webhooks at site level. Moreover, still from a full provisioning template perspective, we do have the new client-side pages, which is a new element that you can use to provision modern client-side pages from the provisioning engine. You know, at the PnP core library, we already have in the PnP core library the capability to play with modern client-side pages. Now we want to introduce this capability from a provisioning engine perspective. And so here is another collection through which we can define a bunch of new client-side pages, where every single client-side page will have information about the zones, the controls to include, and of course, in the section related to the controls, we will be able to define if we want to use any specific client-side web part, whether it is a native one or it is a custom one that we want to install and then reference from the provisioning schema. Of course, I will not dig into the details of every single element or attribute. I rather prefer to give you an high-level idea of what will come out from a schema perspective. So, moving on, we also have still at the template level the capability to define what is the template culture info for the site that we are provisioning. So, for example, when you have to do the provisioning of new data rows and you want to have a specific formatting for date fields or stuff like that, you can use this information, or better, we will be able to use this information during provisioning to do proper formatting and proper handling of data formats during the provisioning. We also have the scope attribute, which is a new one. And this attribute will allow us to understand what kind of target we have for our template. So it could be a root site of a site collection, or it could be a sub-web, so that playing around this attribute, we will be able to be more accurate when provisioning stuff, as well as when extracting stuff from a site. Moreover, what else? Going forward, we have at the navigation level, we have a flag that can be used to enable the tree-view view in the UI of SharePoint, which was another requirement from the community. Then, from a role assignment perspective, so from a security settings perspective, now we will be able to also remove a role assignment from a site. Let's say, for example, that starting from the out-of-the-box set of role assignments, we want to customize a site, let's say a team site, from which we want to remove an out-of-the-box pre-assigned role assignment, and we want to add some new custom role assignments, or during a maintenance process, we want to remove role assignments that we previously assigned using the provisioning engine. By doing the delta handling, we can remove those assignments using this new attribute. Again, and let me stress this information, this is just right now at schema level. We still don't have the support from the engine perspective, but in order to be able to implement those capabilities at the engine level, first of all, we need to have them at the schema level. And that's why I'm sharing with you what we did. So let me proceed. For example, here we are in the data row section. So whenever you want to load custom data and not only the information architecture of your solution. So you create a list, you want to create a bunch of new data rows in the list. One well-known issue, let me call it issue, is that if you have a template in which you have a bunch of data rows items and you apply that template once, those items, those rows will be created, and that's okay. Once you apply one more time that template, if you do not remove the data rows or if you do not exclude the handler for the data rows, those data rows will be created again, and you will find doubled items in your list, because we do not care of the ID or of something that can identify that those rows are already existing. That's why, based on a community suggestion, we added the key column attribute, which will allow us to identify an already existing row and to avoid creating doubled items in the target list. I think that's really useful. We also have the new update behavior attribute, which will allow us to say, if there is a row already existing in the target list, what shall we do? We should overwrite that data row with the values that we have in the provisioning template file, or we can simply skip it if it already exists. It's up to you to set this behavior and to define what will be the behavior of the engine. Again, we still need to implement this capability. At the list instance level, whenever we will define a new list instance, again, we will be able to define custom webhooks for that list. And right now, we already have, from a SharePoint Online API perspective, the capability to define a webhook. So this setting will be not only at schema level, but we will be pretty soon able to define the object handler that will process this setting and will create the webhooks for you. You need to keep in mind that whenever you create a webhook, it will last for up to 6 months, and then it will expire. So you will have to apply your template and to create and to register or refresh the webhooks on a time base. So, for example, you can have a job or something like that that will apply every 5 months or every almost 6 months, the template in order to refresh your subscription. Of course, we can't do that automatically with the engine, so it will be on your charge. Moreover, we also added some settings about the IRM settings. So there is a new section through which you can define all of the settings that you have to define information right management rules. And again, I will not dig into all of the attributes, but you can do almost everything that you can do using the client-side object model. Let me move on. Okay, we have the no crawl attribute, which is again one community suggested new attribute for the list instance. And we also have the list experience attribute, which can be used to define if you want to use the classic experience, the new or modern experience, or you want to keep the out-of-the-box settings and so let the platform do the automatic choice for you. And I think this one is really useful as well, because most of the people in the community are struggling when they need to create a new list and they want to use, for example, the provisioning engine, but then they want to revert the UI, for example, to the classic experience. And so using this flag, this attribute, you will be able to do it completely in an automatic way just using the provisioning engine. What else? It's a long list, okay. We have a few new attributes still at the list level to define what will be the default URL for the display, the edit, and the new form for items, as you can see. And mainly, we tried to have at the list instance element level all of the properties as attributes from an XML schema perspective, all of the new properties that Microsoft added in the last few months in the client-side object model definition of the list instance. So we added quite a lot of new attributes just to be completely aligned with what can be done using CSOM. The overall goal of the engine is to give us, to all of us, a full coverage of the capabilities available through CSOM. That's why, for example, we also have the image URL, so you can customize the URL of the image of the logo of a list instance in SharePoint when you create it. We can, of course, enable IRM if we have also the other settings on the other side. We can define if it is an application list or not, and so on and so forth. I will go pretty fast on this list because it's a long list. This one is useful. At the folder level, we added the capability to have property bag entries. Because from season perspective, you can do that, but from an engine perspective, you were not able to do that, and now you can. And what else? You can play around a content type binding element so that you can hide one content type binding from a list of content types if needed. And you can also declare that you want to remove all of the existing content types from a target list when you create, from a target document set when you create a new one, so that you can clear the list of allowed content types and you can add all of the custom content types that you want to have. Again, at the list instance field reference, so whenever you create a mapping between a field and a list instance, so you make a reference to a field, you can not only create such a reference, but if you want, you can remove a reference. So if you want to customize the out-of-the-box list, removing something that out of the box is there, you can use this attribute. Or if you want to later on do maintenance on your own custom provisioned list definitions, you can use this attribute to remove a binding between a field ref and a list instance. This is already, it has already been covered. And what else? Okay, we have from a file level perspective, whenever you will define a file item in order to update a new file in the target site, you will also be able to define a name, which will be the target file name in SharePoint. Right now, we use exactly the same name of the file that you have in your own environment. So you have a file on your file system, you create a line, one file element in the provisioning template, and the name of the file that you have in your file system will be the same for the file in SharePoint Online. Now, with the target file name, you can rename, and in fact, it is an optional element, an optional attribute. You can rename the file and define your custom name when you do the upload. We introduced support for image renditions. So if you are working in a, how can I say kindly, in a more publishing-oriented site, can I say this, that those coming from the old school way of doing publishing site in SharePoint, or is it too hard? No answer from this.
No,
okay.
I think it's fair. It sounds
is it
bad,
fair?
but it's, yeah, I think people are understanding what we're talking. So.
Okay, so if you are using such kind of sites, you can also play around image renditions, and you can define custom image renditions using this element. And I think last but not least, here we have at the term group level, so whenever you create a bunch of terms in term sets in a term group, you will have the capability to define if any already existing term will have to be eventually updated. So right now, whenever we do the provisioning of a term group, if a term already exists, we simply skip it. And so if you update at the provisioning template level any value, we will not be able to do the update for you and to do delta handling of the terms in the term store. We can simply add new terms or just play with the new term groups or term sets that you want to create. Using this new attribute, you will be able to say that when the provisioning template defines a term group which already exists in the target environment, maybe you want to override any already existing item with the values that you have in the provisioning template, or you will skip them, which is the default behavior that we have right now, and that's why this optional attribute by default will have a value of skip. That's a long list. It will take a while to create all of the code at the engine level to support all of these new capabilities. But we think that once we will be ready, not only from a schema perspective, but also from an engine perspective, we will have almost full coverage of the really useful and main capabilities needed for real business solution based on the provisioning engine. And I hope you agree with me. I see there are some inputs or questions in the chat area. Let me skim through them.
It was more generic questions and those being tackled. So I would say after this schema, and like Paolo said, the schema has to be there first, so we're able to actually start implementing the engine. So as part of the June release, we unfortunately can't get all of these new capabilities available. Which means that there will be an additional release. We're planning to do an additional release in the end of June because we'll skip the July release, which is a classical thing what we do. Because Europeans are on vacation on July and everybody is on vacation, we want to avoid the problems. Well, we don't want to actually release a version without any specific functionalities. Now, when we get now that schema has been defined, the core team members and the additional persons are starting to implement these capabilities in the engine side, and we get that then available. Europeans are always on vacation. Yeah. To be fair, we do not have a 1.5 months between November and December when we do not work. So we actually work through the winter time. But
and in July I will work, by the way.
Yeah,
and I'm
European.
Work in
July as well. But yeah, we kind of reduced the load of the core team as well. Then there will be more vacation time as well. And a good comment from Ryan. What else there would be on winter, especially in Finland or in Scandinavia or in Canada or in Seattle. Anything else what you want to add, Paolo, on this one?
Yeah, just want to ask to the people if they have any feedback or any complaint. I mean, now the schema is ready. We can merge it. Now it is in the experimental branch. We can merge it in the final branch and we can release the new version officially and start working on it, of course. But if there are any last minute requests or concern, let us know. Better sooner than later, because we are really close to stamp the new version and say, okay, the next one will be in the next, let's say, 3 or 6 months. So just to let you know, if you have anything to say it now or never.
Now, one point to add on that one, and Ralph has a good question as well. So obviously what we want to do, with this release is that this is already kind of addressing 99% of all of the CSAM APIs which are available. So we're trying to kind of look down on all of the APIs, so we're able to easily automate applyment of configurations on the sites using PowerShell as an example. And we're not aware actually of that many things which would be missing, which we could implement at this point in the engine. Coming back on Ralph's question around will it break stuff? Answer is no, it won't. So we in the PnP, PnP PowerShell, PnP Sites Core, we always target and implement our stuff in a way that where it's backward compatible, which is causing us challenges every now and then. But we absolutely understand that people need to be able to easily upgrade on the latest version of the component. To be fair, there's always a risk. There might be some issues and there might be some stuff, and if there's any critical findings, we'll fix them in matter of maybe hours, looking into how we've been working on the past as well. And you could always fall back on the previous version until we get the hotfix available, if hotfix is needed. I think last time, I can't remember when we did a hotfix for Sites Core. Maybe last autumn there was a few accidents, and then we needed to do a hotfix for it. But
I think it was February or March, something like that. But no, yeah. Maybe even earlier. Yeah.
Yeah. But as a rule of thumb, we do not break. We have a full backward compatibility, and from a method perspective, yes, in the Sites Core object, every now and then we do deprecate stuff. But we deprecate it in a way that there's at least two months a notification as a deprecation attribute in a code. So if you're upgrading to the latest version, you immediately see, okay, that functionality is going to go away on specific release. So you'll have a notice on that one within the Visual Studio IDE. And I'm not aware that we have deprecated that many stuff during this year. Actually, we probably haven't. I can't remember anything specific which would have been gone away. In the past, we needed to do some cleaning on the methods because there were small issues here and there which we wanted to get cleaned. But it should be okay. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. No, go ahead, please.
No. We are looking in. Obviously, we don't want to break anybody. The only way people can be successful on this community effort is that we don't break you. So we do understand that, and that's absolutely the objective.
And I was just adding that even if we do the deprecation of some properties or methods during the lifetime of the project, usually we say this method is deprecated within the next 2 or 3 months, we will remove it. But in reality, very often we still have items deprecated and we don't concretely remove them, or we don't remove them from the engine. So it is a kind of a warning, but usually we wait for a long time before removing stuff, exactly for the purpose of not introducing any breaking changes or any issue in your own solutions, because we develop on PnP as you, and we don't want to have such kind of issues.
Now, Irvin is hinting on a relatively big deprecation thingy, which is happening within the next release. Irvin, do you want to actually tell that, or should I? Either way.
No, I can tell it. So it's June 2017. It means that from the next release, none of the -spo commandlets will be around anymore. If you upgrade to the June release, it's only -PnP commandlets that will work.
Let's be 100% super clear on that. So let's clarify the situation. If you're using SharePoint Online commandlets, those are starting with an SPO prefix. Due a reasons or another, when the PnP commandlets emerged, we were using exactly the same prefix, and that caused problems. So we started using the PnP prefix and commandlets, what was it, October, November?
I don't remember. But
in that range, yes. That time frame. Yeah.
Far enough.
Yeah.
And the objective was, and even in the notifications when you're using the SPO commandlets, it is actually telling that this will be deprecated on June. And now,
warnings have been on your screen.
Yes. And now, starting from June, the classic PnP commandlets, which started with the SPO prefix, will no longer work. So you can easily replace them with the PnP. Now, obviously, SharePoint Online Admin PowerShell will still use SPO prefix. So let's not actually get confused on that one. So then now, from this moment forward, there's a clear differentiator. Is it a PnP commandlets or is it a SharePoint Online commandlet? And that's a good thing. That should clarify the situation in the future. Good. I think that's enough on this one. So, let me flip back on the slides for a few slides, which we actually went through partly already last time. But we didn't have a time for a proper demo and clarification how things are. So, because we talked about the new announcements on the SharePoint development in the last SIG for PnP PowerShell and PnP Core as well. But what I wanted to do is quickly then come back on this one. So Office 365 CDN, and kind of clarify the value, clarify what it actually does. So we get it recorded as well, and people understand that actually, if you're using, for example, WCM Pages in SharePoint Online, this might significantly increase your performance just by enabling them. So you don't have to do anything else, and magically you'll be tens of % faster, theoretically at least. It depends on the deployment, absolutely. So I wanted to go back on and have a quick discussion on the Office 365 CDN. And it's not just the public, it's also the private CDN. There has been quite a few questions around this one in the tech community, techcommunity.com, and in the SharePoint developer section. So it's good to go through this one, and we'll continue answering those questions in the tech community as well. Now, we have two different, starting from the GA of Office 365 CDN, which is part of your subscription. So if you have an E1, or I think from E3 forward, I think it's E3, I don't remember. But Office 365 CDN is available for you to use. And the whole point of the Office 365 CDN is that you do not need to use a third-party CDN for your static assets, for your customizations, for your whatever images and JavaScript files and all of that, which to host those files outside of SharePoint, which would increase the performance. So what we're doing in the Office 365 CDN is that you are able to configure a one document library as a source for the CDN. And then all of those assets from that document library will be replicated to content delivery network endpoints, which will then make the sites faster across the world. So this will have a positive performance impact on SharePoint Online. Now, so we are able to publish static assets, and this is static assets, JavaScript, CSS files, images. If it's an ASPX file or master file, those requires a server-side operation, so it doesn't work for them. And you're able to, for example, use this one for hosting your client-side web parts if you're using SharePoint Framework, so that makes a lot of sense. The Office 365 CDN has two modes. It has an anonymous mode and authenticated mode. So anonymous mode is called essentially public CDN, and the authenticated mode is called the private CDN. The private CDN is mainly for WCM scenarios, and it actually works automatically just by enabling it, which is kind of magic, and I'll explain how it works in a second. And by default, the CDN is disabled. So we definitely don't want to enable anybody this by default, because people might actually freak out. So it is disabled, but you can easily enable that within your tenant using PowerShell. And I'm going to do a quick demo on that one during this call as well. Quickly explaining the different assets. So Office 365 public CDN. So tenant administrator configures a library or a folder to be a CDN endpoint and uploads some static assets to that folder. And what will happen is that those static assets are getting replicated to the CDN endpoints all around the world. We in Microsoft, we have quite nice coverage in our data centers, but then CDN providers have even higher coverage across the world. So the assets will be closer for your end users because they're getting replicated closer to them from a network distance perspective. And then the public CDN works in a way that you will have well-known URL, which you can use to reference directly those assets from the CDN. And really the key value of this one is to avoid, for example, the fact that quite often Azure subscriptions are being managed by different persons than Office 365 subscription. And then Office 365 people need to request the Azure people to do something like Azure CDN, and that gets complicated. Now that this is kind of a natively baked in for free for you in Office 365 subscription, you can take advantage of this without the requirement of jumping across the teams and making things happen in a complex way. Now, the one thing to notice here, the public CDN is an anonymous. Those static assets, so CSS files, JavaScript files, images, will be anonymously available through the CDN. And that quite often freaks out people. It's like, oh, the immediate reaction is that, no, my content anonymously available. Well, again, it's a decision. You can use that or you don't have to use that. The key point to notice on this one, however, is that it's not your content. Your content is not exposed anonymously. It's just static assets. So your JavaScript typically doesn't have any secrets or keys or passwords or anything like that, because that would be just absolutely foolish. Or the images, for example, for your branding or your web parts or your customizations, they typically are logos or they're assets, and they don't actually contain confidential information. So from that perspective, it's not like we're accessing content through the Office 365 CDN. Really important point to remember. And like mentioned, by default, disabled, and it is a tenant operation to enable this. Now, The private CDN is slightly different, and like I said, this is mainly designed for classic WCM publishing sites, which are using the classic page layouts and master pages scenarios. So what happens is that the tenant administrator enables the capabilities, and when end users are referencing images, for example, let's say that there's a WCM page where they said that the page image is coming from a library which has been set for CDN or which has been enabled for CDN. What's going to happen is that when the browsers are requesting that page, that image is automatically rewritten to be coming from CDN. And that will then make the performance of even the content more efficient. And the private CDN means also that the persons need to have permissions to those assets which are getting used within the WCM sites. So even though it's content as in images, not actual content which as in written text or files, it's being you need to be authenticated and you need to be authorized to get access on that asset before it's getting served from the CDN network. So, and this one is fully automated thing. You cannot actually, how would I put it? It works at the level of whenever we are creating the HTML of the WCM page, we rewrite those asset URLs when we send them back to the browser, and then the browser starts requesting, for example, images, then those images are coming directly from the CDN. And that is increasing the performance quite significantly. I can't give you an exact numbers, how much it increased the performance in our own Microsoft intranet, our MSW intranet, but it had a significant, clearly visible impact, and it was much faster, the portal, after enabling this in practice. So, cool. So how do we actually enable this? By default, it is disabled, like mentioned. If you do have a latest version or pretty latest version of SPO Admin Management PowerShell, you'll connect to the service. You'll do, well, you can check that the tenant connection is fine. And then there's a PowerShell command, let's set SPO tenant CDN enabled. And you need to actually flip and provide, is it a private CDN or is it a public CDN which you want to enable? And that will automatically enable that CDN using default settings. You're able to actually bypass a parameter where you say, yeah, don't use the default settings. I'm going to configure all of the settings by myself after it has been enabled. But the default settings in many cases are actually optimal. So it's kind of a based, the default settings are based on what we've been seeing, how customers are using WCM pages, for example, for private CDN side, and how do we make them as easy as possible to increase the performance just by enabling the commandlet and just by enabling the CDN capability. We have few new commandlets in the SharePoint Online Management cell for managing the CDN capabilities. So get sets SPO tenant CDN enabled, so you can check if it's enabled. You can enable the capabilities. Get set SPO tenant CDN origins. This is being used to enable or tell the CDN capability that which are those document libraries or folders where we actually serve the content to CDN. So when you enable the CDN, it doesn't mean that all magically just everything is moved into CDN. No, that's not what's going to happen. You are technically able to, well, what you need to do is enable explicitly those folders which will act as your CDN through Office 365. And then there's additional CDN tenant policy settings. So you're able to filter down on allowed file extensions. So if you don't like, for example, images to get replicated on the CDN, but JavaScript files and CSS files are fine, you can filter that one down. There's restricted site classification. So essentially you're able to say if the site classification is a high, let's say, critical secret site, let's not actually get that content through CDN. And then also a setting related on disabling CDN for sites with no script enabled. That is a super interesting statement. No script enabled, which means script. No, never mind. So, but let's Have a quick look on this one. So let me try to explain how it actually works from an admin perspective and what's the benefits out of this one. And you can ask absolutely questions after the demo. My challenge right now is that I only have one screen, so I can't actually see your questions live when they're being asked. So I'll come back on the questions after the demo as well. So let me share my screen and somebody needs to tell me when the screen sharing is working fine. Cool, Paula got it. And US got it as well. Excellent. So let me go to PowerShell, or well, in my case, I'm using Visual Studio Code throughout my customization, also including PowerShell. Visual Studio Code is an awesome PowerShell tool as well. It's actually faster and more easily usable. And you can let me actually flip the theming quickly to be more aligned on the PowerShell UI. So that looks pretty okay. So how do we enable this and how do we configure that? So I'm using I think this is my developer tenants or one of the developer tenants in PnP which we're using. I've already connected here so I can do get SBO site. And I can see that I have a connection against SharePoint Online within my PowerShell session. Like you can see from the prefix, it is an SBO prefix. So these are native SharePoint Online management PowerShell commandlets. Super clear on that one. I can have a look on the current status of the tenant CDN tenant enabled by using the SBO tenant CDN enabled CDN type public or private. In my case, the public has been enabled already, and probably the private is enabled as well. So I'm not going to do that live here, but I'm going to configure one additional origin because it takes a while actually to catch up the CDN configuration to enable. We can actually enable the private one, so I can show how that can be done. So this one set SBO tenant CDN enabled, and you can flip again the CDN type. You define which CDN type you want to enable. If you don't like the default origins to get enabled, you can say no default origins, and that means that the default origins won't actually be enabled on the CDN. That could be useful information because when you disable public CDN, it actually takes, was it up to 30 days, and I need to double check that setting, when the files are still available in the CDN. So you probably want to be super careful, or you want to be sure that you know what are those origins which are getting configured. So using the no default origins is actually a good practice. So you don't actually get the default settings maybe available, except for the private CDN. The private CDN default settings are optimized for WCM, and the private one has the authenticated option as well. So that's kind of much better from that perspective. In here, it has the no default origins as well, but I'm going to enable this one in this tenant. So let's actually execute that one. It's going to ask me, are you sure? Are you actually 100% sure that you want to do that? So let's actually do that. And like it mentioned here, this is a feature built on a third-party application with privacy and compliance standards that differ from commitments and outlined by Microsoft Office 365 Trust Center. So there is small differences around how the data is being replicated. We use third-party CDN provider for this functionality, which is a good thing to be aware as well. So if that's an issue for you, then maybe you still want to use the classic way of referencing assets and everything else directly from SharePoint Online, not from CDN. But it's an option to do this functionality as well. In my case, I'm going to do yes. And what happened, I'm going to zoom in. The private CDNs is now enabled with the default settings, and the default settings are that the origins are user photo ASPX. And somebody might be thinking, why is that? Well, because user photo ASPX is the one which is actually used for showing user profile images for the whenever somebody is looking into the user profile. And then site assets is another default setting, because a lot of the images which is used within the content of the sites is stored automatically to the site assets folder. And notice also here we are using wildcards in here, which essentially means in every single site, in this case, in every single site in my tenant, the site assets folder, if an image is referenced in my content, in my WCM page, from a site assets folder, it is getting served through the CDN. That's what it essentially means. I can be more specific as well. So I can absolutely say I will have only one location where my images are coming from, or I can configure additional settings as well. But the wildcards are supported in here as well. One other thing what it's actually saying is that files of a type GIF, ICO, JP, JPG, JS, and PNG stored in the locations configured to serve as a private CDN origins will now also be served and cached in the CDN. Although only authenticated users are authorized to access such content, the CDN is not monitored nor covered by Microsoft content policies. Once again, we're using third party, so we need to have all of these statements available so everybody knows what we actually have and how it behaves. Now, we can check the current policies, and the policies were the ones where you can filter down the behavior based on the site policy setting. So you can say that it's a super secret site, it's not using CDN, which is one option. Or I can actually configure additional origins here as well. So let's actually have a quick look on my origins. Here's an example of doing a wildcard origin for a CDN folder across all of the sites. Or this could be a specific folder within a specific site collection, which is then enabled as a CDN origin. And once again, if an image or JavaScript files is referenced from that location, it is automatically getting served from the CDN. Right now, for my public CDN, if I do an F8, we should see a few different options. So I've changed my setting. So I have a master page, style library, and CDN. As my content origins. And that means that if I drag and drop something in the CDN folder, it will be served through the public CDN in this case. On my private, I didn't change those settings. And obviously there are commandlets to clean this one up as well. Now, how would I actually make sure that my public CDN is working, and how does it actually work, and how does it work in practice? So let me do this quickly. I'm going to move into my tenant. Here's my root side of my sample tenant. Here's my CDN folder, which is there to host static assets through the CDN. In this case, I've added here to-do web part. So to-do web part is a client-side SharePoint framework web part, and the assets which actually are containing the functionality, so the JavaScript, are hosted from this folder. So now, if I create a page, let's actually add a page. If add a page functionality moves well. I haven't tested this for a while, so I hope that this works. So I can actually add my to-do web part on a page, and the to-do web part actually is working from the CDN, if it's actually working from the CDN. I didn't test this before my demo, so I do apologize if it's not actually working. Let me do this. Oh yeah, so let's add that one. There we go. Let's actually, yeah, I know what's actually missing. Oh, what's wrong? I'm going to show this one with an image then if, okay. Interesting. I don't know what's actually right now wrong. Okay, let me do this other way around. So I'm going to go to the site content, and then I'm going to create a classic page so I can more efficiently and easily show you how it's actually being, how it actually works. So I'm going to come here on site pages, then I'm going to do new, and I'm going to do a wiki page. And let's call this SIG demo. And here now I'm in it. Now I have this page available, but actually I forgot to upload any images to my CDN folder. So let me do that. And let's go to the CDN folder. I want to upload an image and a file. And let's upload one of the marketing pointers from here, SPFX training package. And I'm uploading that PNG file to this folder. Now, in this case, because it's a public CDN, this image is immediately available for me to consume within my content or within my customizations with a well-known URL. And if you're wondering on the structure of the URL, we can easily check it out from our documentation. So We have our general availability for Office 365 CDN blog post, which is from mid-April, a month ago. And this is actually explaining a lot of the details, and it's answering a lot of the questions as well. It also has a more detailed demo walking through how things are working and what are the settings and all of that. There is also, I'm just going to copy that one quickly. There's also a second article in the support.office.com, which is kind of the IT Pro admin specific article, defining some of the settings as well and explaining how the behavior works, and there's additional resources available. Now, what we did here, let's see, where do I have my page? There's my page. So the image has been uploaded to my CDN folder. Now, because it's a public CDN, it has a well-known URL. I cannot access this image outside of the SharePoint, but the easiest way to understand that it's working properly is just to do an insert picture from address, and then do formatting of the address properly. So let me actually take this one and open that one in Notepad, and I'll zoom in here, and I'll actually show you the values in a second. So we're using sppnp.sharepoint.com. It is a CDN folder. Let's call that CDN. And then I need that name of the actual image. So how do I get the name of the image? Can I copy that? No, I can't. Really? Okay, let's take it in here. There's the name of the image. So I'm building this now manually by hand because this is public CDN. You can probably see that now more clearly. So we are using a specific well-known prefix as the domain. There's my tenant URL, and that's then the additional path. It is in the CDN folder, and that's the image what I'm actually using. So now if I'm being successful, I can go to this page, reference the image directly, and click OK, and we should see that the image coming up from the CDN. And I can even, if I save the page, the easiest way to understand where is it actually coming from is to do F12, for example, in the Chrome. Go to the network layer. Let's do an F5 or update in here. Or actually, sources is even better. So we can then see the public CDN URL, and there's my URL. I'm going to zoom in here in a second, and we can actually see the content, what's coming up from the URL. If you're using a private CDN, the prefix will be privatecdn.sharepointonline.com, and then you can see what assets are coming through the private CDN. But this way you can be 100% sure that your configuration has been successful, which hopefully makes sense. Good. I don't have a hard stop on the hour, so sorry for once again taking too much time. I do know that I'm talking always too much, so I'm going to flip back on the slides, and I think we go back on the Q&A discussions if there's any random questions where we can help within the following minutes. Any questions on the CDN stuff, which I missed? And yes, on the referrer thing, you cannot reference those assets outside of the SharePoint tenant, because this is not really a replacement for, let's say, a commercial CDN. This is targeted for your Office 365 CDN usage. So there is a referrer check, and it has to be SharePoint.com to make this work in practice. Good. And there is also CSOM APIs for all of the CDN functionalities. That is correct, from Warthaman. So absolutely available. So you can automate that as part of the provisioning and whatever is your business model. So absolutely. You don't have to do that using PowerShell. Let's see. Did I actually miss it? No, there wasn't that many questions other than this one. So you won't pay separately to Azure like before. That is correct. Yes, that's really the value on this one. This is add-on service. There's no additional cost for you. You don't actually have to pay for Azure like in the Azure CDN. And I think it's a great benefit, great service, and great improvement in SharePoint Online, because it also simplifies the classic IT challenges where, like mentioned, the SharePoint Online is being managed by different people and the Azure is being managed by different people. So Taxonomy. Okay, let's see. Jacob. So there is a question. Somebody needs to recopy that question if possible. Is there a standard way to validate performance before and after enabling CDN? Unfortunately, no. That would be following up on how fast your stuff is loading. So there's no kind of a tooling, detailed tooling for us for the field at this point. We're highly interested on that kind of feedback though. So we're looking into making additional ways for you to understand the challenges and bottlenecks within your SharePoint Online and portals and all of that. So you actually have all the details to understand what's causing delays as well. Good. Let's see. How about licensing if CDN is commercialized? So the CDN, so you cannot commercialize this CDN by yourself because this is only for your tenant. So you cannot actually share assets cross tenants. So it's only enabled for that particular tenant and for where the assets are being actually managed as well. Still needing some way to get term IDs in the provisioning, loopback ID values from term store. Still needing some way to get term IDs in the provisioning. I think we're exposing term IDs as part of the term CSOM API, but I do know that the REST API is a classic request. That's number one item in our user voice, and we would request people to vote there if that's what you're looking for as well. So lookup ID values from term store. I don't understand the question, Jacob. I'm really sorry.
I think what he means is, and Jacob can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's like in a provisioning template that you want to be able to reference a existing term.
With an ID. Oh, yeah.
With an ID.
Yeah. So that would be actually for Paolo to think about maybe schema design.
And the complexity there. Yeah. It's a token. It's in the token area.
Exactly. Yeah. It's in the token area. That's true.
And the complexity there is just the way how we handle the tokens, because we load them up front before we start to parse the template, and we would have to make a somewhat more dynamic call.
Yes.
Resolving that ID, because the ID could have been provisioned actually in the template itself.
Yeah.
Also.
True.
Exactly. I think the question relates to one issue that is still open, I think, in the repo. And the ask is to have all of the term ID preloaded and made available as tokens, but it will be really, really heavy and huge for the engine to load all of them at the beginning.
It requires a bit of a change on the architecture of the token engine, sort of, because right now everything we load effectively into memory. If we would load the whole taxonomy into memory, well, if you have a small taxonomy, that's sort of okay. But if you have like hundreds of thousands of items in there, it's a bit of a different story. So we would have to do a dynamic lookup then. And the engine, as it is currently, does not really handle that nicely.
Yeah.
We would have to change that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's an understandable request, but the required changes are pretty huge. Yes. Yes, we got a thumbs up. Yay! Done. Any other questions? If we have two more additional minutes, we do apologize for taking additional time. It was again me. I was talking way too much. Which means that it becomes a separate manual task, just as is within migration. Yeah, on that specific scenario. Obviously, yes. You can always code your way around certain things, but obviously that particular scenario would be nice to have natively within the engine supported. But we need to make some changes, like Irvin mentioned, on that one.
Yeah.
Good. No third parties. Third party options for implementing this. Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
You could build an extensibility handler.
Yes. You can always code yourself around the challenge. Yeah. Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
if there's a bug within your code, just code more and you can get it fixed, or code around the bug. So. Cool. If there's any additional questions, I know that, like mentioned, we are going already on overtime. I do apologize on that. Tech community or SB, let me actually write that one down. So if we are trying to follow up on this one quite closely as well. And there's quite active discussions in the tech community, SB PnP community. So you can always ask questions there. You can reference the people and all of that. So people know that you're asking, for example, from a specific persons. If you're using tech community, please do ask public questions. Do not use private messaging or messages, because that does not make any sense. We do not scale, unfortunately, for that. If I'm getting an answer for somebody, I would love to get it in somewhere where everybody else can find it using Google. For example, the tech community is there for that reason. So please do ask questions openly. That would be highly beneficial. Good. And also Bing. Yes, thank you, Patrick. Thank you for that. If you're using bing.com, absolutely. Cool. I think we close up for this one. Thank you for joining, and thank you for the discussion. We will have the next SB PnP and PowerShell special interest groups within 2 weeks. And on that time, we will already have the latest June version out. We'll go through the changes and all of that. There is a SharePoint framework and JavaScript special interest group on bi-weekly on Thursdays, not on this week, but next Thursday. So if you're interested in more on the client-side development, you can join there as well if you have time and availability. But thank you everybody for joining, and thank you for questions. Thank you for your valuable input and all of that, because that makes us to our software much better. So we know what's missing, what needs to be addressed. So thank you for that, and let's stay in touch. Bye-bye.